I think we can safely call this Joss Whedon's year. Never before has a single filmmaker had such an impressive year, and he did it in typical Joss fashion. Consider what this guy is really known for in his TV shows like Buffy, Angel, Firefly, and Dollhouse. If you had to narrow it down to the genres that they represent, well, the shows are all about horror, a mix of sci-fi and action, and comedy. I don't think it's a coincidence then that the three films that he has a part in, whether he writes, directs, or both, happen to be a horror film, one of the biggest sci-fi action films of all time, and now a comedy. A Shakespearean comedy at that. Having Whedon and Shakespeare together, well, that's part way to a superhero writing team. You just need to add Tom Stoppard, William Goldman, Rod Serling, and Christopher Nolan. And yes, Goldman would be the Hulk. Why? Because if you wrote Dreamcatcher, you'd turn into a giant rage monster too. This is Real School. Do you ever feel like a film is sometimes made just for you? There are a few things I love to do on this earth. I love to teach, Shakespeare especially. I love to act, and I love to absorb anything Joss Whedon related. So when I hear that Joss Whedon is following up the Avengers with a Shakespearean comedy, and it happens to be Much Ado About Nothing, a play where I played Benedict only about a year ago, it's like the fates of film are smiling down on me. Plus, it's making its debut at this year's TIFF, which is like the festival in my backyard. This is apparently a long time in the making as well. When I had the fortune of interviewing Amy Acker, yes, I'm totally name dropping. She told me that Joss often had these Shakespeare parties where he got this group of actors to come to his giant house, drink wine, and read Shakespeare. Not to mention that Joss is clearly a Shakespeare fan. If you've ever watched Firefly, then you get a sense of how poetic the language is in that universe. Not to mention that Acker's latter character in Angel, Illyria, was a modern Shakespearean character, and her name, Illyria, is actually the name of the setting of Twelfth Night. Well, all that passion and preparation really paid off. Acker especially was near perfect. Her Beatrice showed such great range, such believability, and she was an absolute pleasure to watch. Her other half, Alexis Denisov, had a little more trouble on screen. While the chemistry between the two of them was undeniable, I mean it should have been because they had years of experience acting together on Angel, and Denisov's comedic timing was better than ever, I felt that some of the choices that he made in the more dramatic moments kind of fell flat. Speaking of choices, it was amazing to see how prominent Joss chose to make the secondary characters. Margaret, played by former Growing Pains kid and now Whedon regular Ashley Johnson, was a perfect example of that. For the first time I've ever seen this play, and remember that I was in it, characters like Margaret were really important. They weren't just a plot device. They had to face the consequences, and they had real emotion. Same goes for Baracchio and Conrad for the first time. Joss was really able to flesh these characters out. What's really crazy is that Baracchio is played by Spencer Treat Clark, the kid from Gladiator and Unbreakable. Look at him, he's all grown up. But Joss did exactly what Sean Mayer told me he was going to do. Name dropping. He took Don John and his minions and gave them an absolutely critical backstory for the first time that I've ever seen that backstory done. Even taking Conrad and making the character female and Don John's lover. Nice take on things. The way Joss was able to do that is he used film itself to the best of its ability. He gave characters things to hold in close-up shots, which really gave the scene different meaning. Something you can't do on a theatrical stage. He had a prologue showing the history between Beatrice and Benedict. He used the visual to create comedy in a manner that you just couldn't do on stage. I would even go so far as to say that his version is a better film adaptation than Kenneth Branagh's in 1993. That's not to say that Branagh clearly doesn't know Shakespeare, but he comes from a different world. Branagh was trained on the stage, and as a result, his Shakespearean adaptations are clearly made by a purist. While Branagh makes films that seem like larger-than-life stage productions, Joss knows how to use cinema to the best of its ability. Part of being such a good filmmaker is Joss has this amazing pool of actors that he pulls from all the time, but two little droplets from that pool stuck out more than the others. And just as it should be in Much Ado About Nothing, Dogberry and Verges stole the show. Already known as Whedon vs. Hams, Tom Lenk and Nathan Fillion were comedic geniuses in this film. And on top of that, Nathan Fillion had never done Shakespeare before. You have to give it to this comedic duo, and that's why they're this episode's For the Win. What was the most surprising about this film is that it didn't feel like a Joss Whedon project. I mean, you knew it was a Joss project because he once again bathed in that tight-knit pool of actors he always uses. But for the first time, I felt that I was watching a Joss Whedon film or a Joss Whedon show that really didn't have his stamp on it. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It was just unexpected. If you're not a fan of Shakespeare or you're not a Whedon Super-fan, well then I can't guarantee you're going to love this film. It's not a perfect film by any means, but it is certainly enjoyable and certainly an earn it in my books. And only days after its TIFF debut, Lionsgate picked up Much Ado About Nothing for a worldwide theatrical release. So when it's released, be sure to go check it out. And if you haven't seen them yet, be sure to check out my interviews with Amy Acker and Sean Mayer. They talk about Much Ado About Nothing. And until next episode, school's out.